Jake Miller stared out the small window of the transport shuttle as Nexus Station 7 grew larger in front of him. The massive space station looked like a metal city floating in the darkness of space. Hundreds of lights blinked across its surface, and ships of all sizes moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing an alien station?" asked the pilot, a gruff man with gray hair. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He had never been this far from Earth before. 3 months ago, he was fixing air conditioners in downtown Chicago. Now he was about to start work on one of the biggest trading stations in the galaxy. The shuttle docked with a loud clang that made Jake jump. He grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers through the airlock. The moment he stepped onto the station, he knew he wasn't on Earth anymore. The air smelled different, like metal and something he couldn't identify. The gravity felt lighter, making each step feel like he might float away. Aliens walked past him in the corridor. Some looked almost human, but with blue skin or extra arms. Others were so strange that Jake couldn't figure out which end was their head. A few stopped to stare at him, and he realized he was probably the only human they had seen in a while. "You must be Miller," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a tall, thin alien with purple skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and black, and when it spoke, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. "I am Velterax, your supervisor. Follow me." Jake followed the alien through several corridors that all looked the same. The walls were covered with panels that blinked with lights he didn't understand. Other aliens walked past them, some carrying strange tools or boxes. A few pointed at Jake and made sounds that might have been laughter. "You humans are all the same," Velterax said without looking back. "Weak, soft, and too emotional. But you work cheap, so the Empire tolerates you." They stopped at a small office filled with equipment Jake didn't recognize. Velterax picked up a long metal rod that sparked with electricity at one end. "This is a plasma prod. You will need it for your job." "What exactly is my job?" Jake asked, taking the rod carefully. It was heavier than it looked. "You will feed the dragons in the detention levels. Every day, you take food down to level 17 and throw it in their cells. Simple work, even for a human." Velterax's 4 arms moved as he talked, like he was conducting music. "The dragons are dangerous beasts. They will try to trick you, make you think they are intelligent. Do not listen to them. Use the prod if they get too close." Jake nodded, but something about this felt wrong. "How many dragons are there?" 12, all captured from dead worlds. "We keep them alive to harvest their scales and blood. Very valuable." Velterax handed Jake a small bag. "This is their food for today. Do not give them more than this amount. We do not want them getting strong." The bag felt almost empty in Jake's hands. He looked inside and saw what looked like scraps of meat and some kind of gray paste. "This is food for 12 dragons? They are not pets, human. They are resources. Feed them just enough to keep them breathing." Velterax pointed to a door marked with symbols Jake couldn't read. "The lift to level 17 is through there. Be back in 1 hour." Jake walked through the door and found himself in front of an elevator. The buttons were covered with alien writing, but one had the number 17 in human numbers. He pressed it and felt his stomach drop as the elevator went down fast. The doors opened to reveal a corridor that looked completely different from the upper levels. The walls were dark metal, and the air was thick and humid. Strange sounds echoed from somewhere ahead, like breathing mixed with low rumbles. The smell hit him immediately. It was like a zoo mixed with a garbage dump. Jake walked forward slowly, the plasma prod in one hand and the bag of food in the other. His footsteps echoed loudly in the corridor. As he got closer to the sounds, he began to see cells on both sides of the hallway. Each cell had thick metal bars and was barely big enough for a large car. Then he saw his first dragon. The creature was huge, easily 20 feet long, with scales that should have been bright red but looked dull and gray. It lay on its side in a cell filled with dirty water and waste. Its eyes were closed, and for a moment Jake thought it might be dead. Then it took a slow, deep breath, and Jake realized it was just sleeping. He looked at the next cell and saw another dragon, this one with scales that might have been blue once. It was awake and watching him with eyes that seemed too intelligent for what Velterax had told him. The dragon didn't roar or try to attack. It just watched him with what looked like curiosity. Jake continued down the corridor and counted 12 cells, each with a dragon inside. Some were sleeping, others were awake and watching him. None of them seemed like the savage beasts he had been warned about. They looked tired, sick, and sad. He stopped at the first cell and looked at the dragon inside. It was awake now, watching him with bright golden eyes. Jake opened the bag of food and looked at the tiny amount of scraps inside. This wouldn't be enough to feed one dragon properly, let alone 12. "Hey there," Jake said softly to the dragon. The creature's head lifted slightly, and Jake could have sworn he saw surprise in its eyes. "I'm supposed to feed you, but this doesn't look like much food." The dragon moved closer to the bars, but slowly, like it didn't want to scare Jake. Up close, Jake could see that the dragon was much thinner than it should be. Its scales were loose, and he could see its ribs through its skin. Jake divided the scraps into 12 tiny portions, giving each dragon barely a handful of food. As he worked, he noticed that the dragons didn't fight over the food or try to grab it from him. They waited patiently, and each one looked at him with those intelligent eyes. When he reached the last cell, Jake realized he still had half of his own lunch in his pocket. He looked at the dragon inside, a smaller one with scales that might have been green. It looked even thinner than the others. Without thinking, Jake pulled out his protein bar and broke it in half. He threw one piece through the bars to the dragon. The creature caught it gently in its mouth and then did something that made Jake's heart skip a beat. The dragon nodded at him. It was a small movement, but definitely a nod, like it was saying thank you. Jake stared at the dragon for a long moment. Velterax had said these were mindless beasts, but Jake had just seen clear intelligence. These dragons weren't savage monsters. They were prisoners, and they were starving. As Jake walked back to the elevator, he could feel 12 pairs of eyes watching him. He knew his job was supposed to be simple. Just throw food in the cells and leave. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. The elevator ride back up felt longer than the trip down. Jake's mind was racing with questions. Why were the dragons so thin? Why did they seem so intelligent? And why did he feel like he had just met 12 people instead of 12 animals? When the elevator doors opened, Jake knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow he was bringing more food. The next morning, Jake woke up before his alarm. He had barely slept, thinking about the dragons and their intelligent eyes. He packed 2 extra protein bars in his pocket, along with an apple from his breakfast ration. "You look tired," said Tony. Rodriguez, his roommate. Tony worked in the station's engine room and had been on Nexus Station for 6 months. "First day getting to you?" "Something like that," Jake replied. He wanted to tell Tony about the dragons, but he wasn't sure how to explain what he had seen. "Hey, do you know anything about the dragons they keep down on level 17? Tony's face changed. He looked around their small room and lowered his voice. "Don't ask too many questions about those things, man. The aliens get really upset when humans start poking around down there. But have you seen them?" "Once, when I was fixing some pipes near that level. They're huge, and they looked—" Tony paused, searching for words. "They looked sad, you know. But the Zephyrians say they're dangerous killers, so I stayed away." Jake nodded and grabbed the bag of dragon food from Velterax. It was the same tiny amount as yesterday. On his way to the elevator, he stopped by the station's waste processing area. The human workers there were supposed to dispose of food that was still good, but past its sell date. Jake knew it was against rules, but he grabbed a bag of bread rolls that were only 1 day old. The elevator ride down to level 17 felt different today. Jake was nervous, but also excited. He wanted to see if the dragons would react the same way as yesterday. The first dragon he had met was awake and waiting by the bars when Jake arrived. Its golden eyes followed him as he approached the cell. Jake divided the official food into 12 portions like before, but this time he also gave each dragon extra food from the waste area. The first dragon ate the scraps quickly, then looked at the bread roll Jake had thrown in. It picked up the roll carefully with one claw and ate it slowly, like it was enjoying the taste. When it finished, it looked at Jake and made a soft sound, almost like a purr. "You like that better than the scraps, don't you?" Jake said quietly. Dragon tilted its head like it was listening to his words. Then it did something amazing. It moved closer to the bars and gently touched the metal with its nose. Looking directly at Jake, Jake reached out slowly and touched the same bar. For a moment, human and dragon were connected through the cold metal. The dragon's eyes seemed to shine brighter, and Jake felt like they were really seeing each other. This became Jake's routine. Every day, he brought the official food and extra food he collected from the waste areas. He started talking to the dragons while he fed them. At first, he just said simple things like, "Good morning," or "Here's your food." But as days passed, he began telling them about his life on Earth, about his family, about why he came to Space. The dragons listened. Jake was sure of it. They would move closer when he talked, and their eyes never left his face. Some of them started making soft sounds when he approached, like they were greeting him. Jake began to notice differences between the dragons. The largest one, with dark red scales, seemed to be their leader. The others looked to it first before eating, like they were asking permission. Jake started calling this one Rex in his mind. There was a smaller dragon with bright blue scales. That always seemed playful. It would make clicking sounds that almost sounded like laughter. Jake called this one Spark. A green-scaled dragon was always gentle and calm. It never pushed to get food first and often waited until the others had eaten. Jake named this one Sage. After 2 weeks of this routine, Jake started noticing changes. The dragons looked healthier. Their scales were getting brighter, and they seemed more active. Rex had started making different sounds, not just the soft purrs, but more complex sounds that almost seemed like words. One day, while Jake was feeding Sage, he heard footsteps in the corridor behind him. He turned to see Commander Lisa Barnes, the station's human security chief, walking toward him with 2 alien guards. "Miller," she said, her voice stern. "We need to talk." Jake's heart started beating fast. "Yes, ma'am?" The station's food consumption reports show unusual patterns. Food is disappearing from the waste processing areas. Food that should be going to the recyclers is vanishing. She stepped closer to him. "Do you know anything about this?" "No, ma'am," Jake lied, trying to keep his voice steady. Behind him, he could hear the dragons moving in their cells, like they sensed danger. Commander Barnes walked past Jake and looked into Rex's cell. The large dragon was standing near the bars, watching her with alert eyes. "These creatures look different than they did a month ago. Healthier, stronger." One of the alien guards, a tall creature with gray skin, spoke up. "Perhaps the human is feeding them too much. Humans are known for being soft-hearted with animals." "Is that what you're doing, Miller?" Commander Barnes asked. "Are you giving these dragons extra food?" Jake looked at Rex, who was still watching the conversation. For just a moment, he could have sworn the dragon nodded slightly, like it was encouraging him to be brave. "I'm just doing my job, Commander. I feed them what Velterex gives me." Commander Barnes stared at him for a long moment. "See that you continue to follow orders exactly, Miller. These aren't pets. They're valuable resources, and we can't have them getting ideas above their station." After the security team left, Jake sat down on the floor outside Rex's cell. His hands were shaking. "That was close," he whispered. Rex moved closer to the bars and made a soft sound. Then the dragon did something that made Jake's eyes go wide. Rex opened its mouth and made a sound that was definitely not a dragon noise. "Close," Rex said, in a voice that was deep and rough but clearly speaking English. Jake jumped to his feet and stared at the dragon. "Did you just talk?" Rex tilted its head and made the sound again. "Talk." Jake looked around at the other dragons. They were all watching him and Rex with intense attention. Spark made a clicking sound and then tried to copy Rex. "Talk," Spark said, though it sounded more like talk. Jake's mind was racing. The dragons weren't just intelligent, they were learning to speak human language. They had been listening to him for weeks, learning his words. "How long have you been able to understand me?" Jake asked Rex. Rex moved closer to the bars. Its golden eyes looked directly into Jake's eyes. When it spoke, its voice was clearer than before. "Always," Rex said. "We always understand." Jake felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. These dragons had understood every word he had said from the very first day. They had been trapped in these cells, starving and alone, but they had been listening and learning and waiting. "Why didn't you speak before?" Jake asked. Rex was quiet for a moment, like it was thinking about how to answer. "Not safe. Other aliens hurt us more. If they know." Jake nodded slowly. He understood. The dragons had been hiding their intelligence to protect themselves, but now they trusted him enough to reveal their secret. "We can talk more," Jake said quietly. "But we have to be careful. Commander Barnes is watching me now." Rex nodded. "We Be careful. You good human. You help us." As Jake rode the elevator back up to the main level, his mind was spinning with questions. If the dragons could talk, what else could they do? How intelligent were they really? And most importantly, what were the Zephyrians really doing to them? Jake knew he was in dangerous territory now. But looking into Rex's eyes had convinced him of one thing. These dragons weren't just intelligent animals. They were people, and they needed his help. Jake couldn't stop thinking about what Rex had told him. For 3 days, he went about his normal routine, but his mind was always on the dragons. During his lunch breaks, he sat alone and tried to figure out what to do with this information. The 4th day, he decided he had to know more. When he went down to level 17, he brought his portable tablet with him. It had a translation program that worked with most alien languages. "Rex," Jake called softly when he reached the large dragon's cell. "I brought something that might help us talk better." Rex moved to the bars immediately. The dragon's English had gotten better each day, but Jake could tell it was still hard for him to find the right words. "What is it?" Rex asked, looking at the tablet. "It's a translator. It might help me understand your real language instead of making you speak mine." Jake held up the device. "Can you try speaking in your own language?" Rex nodded and opened his mouth. What came out was nothing like the rough English he had been using. It was a series of musical sounds, like singing mixed with the rumble of thunder. The tablet beeped and showed text on the screen. "Greetings, kind human. We have waited long for someone like you." Jake stared at the screen. Rex's real voice was beautiful, and the words were formal and intelligent. "Rex, how long have you been able to speak like this?" Rex sang another series of sounds. The tablet translated. "We have always possessed language. Our people are ancient, and our civilization is older than most species in this galaxy." "Your people?" Jake felt his heart beating faster. "There are more dragons?" The other dragons had moved closer to their cell bars, listening to the conversation. Rex looked at them, then back at Jake. His golden eyes seemed sad when he spoke again. "Yes, young human. We are not the last. But we are prisoners taken from our world many cycles ago. The gray ones you call Zephyrians destroyed our cities and captured those of us who survived. Jake's hands were shaking as he held the tablet. How long ago? In your counting, nearly 300 years. Jake almost dropped the tablet. 300 years. These dragons had been prisoners for 3 centuries, and the station workers thought they were just dumb animals. What happened to your world? Jake asked. Rex was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was even sadder than before. The Zephyrians wanted our knowledge. We were master builders, creators of great ships and cities. But when? We would not share our secrets willingly. They came with weapons. The tablet continued translating as Rex told his story. They bombed our cities from space. Millions of our people died in the first attack. Those who survived the bombing were hunted down. They took the young and the strong as prisoners. The old and the sick were left to die. Jake felt sick to his stomach. And you've been here ever since? Not here. We have been moved from place to place, station to station. Always kept weak, always hungry, so we cannot use our true strength. The gray ones tell others that we are savage beasts from dead worlds. They sell our scales and blood, but that is not their real purpose. What is their real purpose? Rex looked around at the other dragons before answering. They study us. They try to learn our secrets. Every few years, they take one of us away to their laboratories. We never see that one again. Spark, the blue dragon, moved closer to her bars and spoke in the musical dragon language. The tablet translated her words. They took my brother 5 years ago. He was young and clever, always making jokes. Now he is gone. Jake realized he was crying. These weren't just intelligent animals being mistreated. These were people who had survived genocide, watched their families die, and been enslaved for centuries. Rex, Jake said, wiping his eyes, is there anything I can do to help? Rex! And the other dragons had a long conversation in their own language. Jake watched the translation scroll across his tablet screen. They were debating something, arguing about whether they could trust him with more information. Finally, Rex turned back to Jake. There is something, but it is dangerous for you. If the gray ones discover what we are asking, they will hurt you. Badly. Tell me, Jake said without hesitation. Our people still live. Not on our old world, but scattered across distant stars. Some escaped the destruction and built new homes. If we could send a message to them, they would come for us. Jake thought about this. How do I send a message to another star system? There is a human who works in the communication center. His name is Dan Foster. He has been kind to humans before. If you could convince him to help. Jake knew Dan. He was a quiet man who ran the station's long-range communication equipment. Jake had eaten lunch with him a few times. What kind of message would I need to send? Rex sang a complex series of notes. The tablet worked hard to translate it. Finally, showing, this is a location code and emergency signal. If any of our people receive it, they will understand that survivors need rescue. Jake saved the message to his tablet. I'll try to talk to Dan, but I need to know more first. Rex, you said you had knowledge that the Zephyrians wanted. What kind of knowledge? Rex's eyes seemed to glow brighter. We are builders and engineers, but not in the way other species understand. We work with living metal, ships that grow instead of being built. Our vessels can travel between stars faster than any ship in this galaxy. Living metal? Our ships are alive in a way. They heal themselves when damaged. They learn and adapt. A single dragon ship can outfight 10 Zephyrian warships. Jake's mind was racing. If this was true, if the dragons really had technology that advanced, then their rescue would change everything. There's something else, Rex continued. The gray ones do not know this, but we have been watching and learning during our imprisonment. We know this station's weaknesses. We know how to disable its defenses and communications. You've been planning an escape? For decades, but we have been too weak and we are only 12. Even with our knowledge, 12 dragons cannot fight. Thousands of station guards, Rex paused. But if our people knew where to find us double quotes Jake, understood. The dragons had been planning and preparing for centuries, but they needed outside help to contact their people and coordinate a rescue. Rex, if your people do come, what happens to the humans on this station? Rex looked at the other dragons again. They had another quick conversation before he answered. Your people are not our enemies. The Grey Ones forced you to work here, just as they imprisoned us. Any human who has shown us kindness would be protected. Jake thought about Tony, about Commander Barnes, about all the other humans working on the station. Most of them had no idea what was really happening on level 17. I need to think about this, Jake said finally. This is bigger than just helping you escape. This could start a war. Rex nodded slowly. Yes, young human. It could, but sometimes war is the only way to stop a greater evil. The Grey Ones have been hunting and enslaving other species for centuries. They tell the galaxy that they bring peace and order, but they bring only death. As Jake rode the elevator back up, his mind was spinning with everything he had learned. The dragons weren't just prisoners. They were survivors of genocide with the knowledge and allies to fight back. And somehow, a maintenance worker from Chicago had become their only hope of contacting the outside world. Jake knew that whatever he decided to do next would change his life forever. But when he thought about Rex's sad golden eyes and Sparks' missing brother, he knew he couldn't walk away. These people had been waiting for help for 300 years, thought it was time someone helped them. Jake couldn't eat dinner that night. He sat in the cafeteria, staring at his food while his mind raced with everything Rex had told him. Tony noticed his strange behavior and sat down across from him. Man, you look terrible. What's going on? Tony asked, taking a bite of his synthetic meat. Jake looked around the cafeteria. Most of the tables were filled with humans eating and talking quietly. A few Zephyrian supervisors sat at their own table, their forearms moving as they spoke. In their clicking language, everyone looked so normal, like nothing was wrong. Tony, Jake said quietly, what would you do if you found out something terrible was happening on this station? Something the Zephyrians didn't want anyone to know about. Tony stopped eating and looked at Jake carefully. That's a dangerous question, buddy. The kind that gets humans sent to the detention levels, he paused. But if it was really terrible, I guess I'd want to stop it. Jake made his decision. I need your help with something. And I need you to promise you won't tell anyone else until I explain everything. Tony nodded slowly. Okay, I promise. What's going on? Jake told him everything. About the dragons being intelligent, about their real history, about the genocide, and the centuries of imprisonment. Tony's eyes got wider and wider as the story went on. You're serious, Tony said when Jake finished. These aren't just smart animals, they're people. Rex has been teaching me some of their history during feeding time. Tony, they had cities and art and families. The Zephyrians murdered millions of them and turned the survivors into a freak show. Tony was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. What do you need me to do? Rex says the dragons need better food to get their strength back. Real protein. Vitamins, medicine if possible. You have access to the storage areas in your section. Can you help me get supplies? That's stealing, Jake. If we get caught. I know, but Tony, these people have been starving for 300 years. How can we not help? Tony looked around the cafeteria again, then back at Jake. Okay, but we need to be smart about this. Commander Barnes is already watching you. We need other people to help, so it's not just us taking stuff. Over the next week, Jake and Tony carefully recruited 2 more humans to their secret group. Kelly Wright was a medic who worked in the station's small hospital. When Jake told her about the dragon's poor health, she immediately wanted to help. She started bringing vitamin supplements and basic medicines from the medical waste. Dan Foster was harder to convince. The communications officer was nervous about breaking rules and getting in trouble. But when Jake showed him the translation of Rex's message to the dragon homeworlds, Dan realized how important this was. If their people are really out there, Dan said, looking at the star coordinates Rex had provided, and if they have the technology you're talking about, this could change everything. Will you send the message? Jake asked. Dan was quiet for a moment. It will take time. I can't just send a random signal to deep space without covering my tracks. Give me a few days to figure out how to do it without getting caught. They're secret. Operation began working better than Jake had hoped. Tony used his maintenance access to redirect food shipments that were supposed to go to the recyclers. Kelly provided medical care and supplements. Jake continued his daily feeding routine, but now he brought much more food and medicine. The dragons began changing rapidly. Their scales grew brighter and stronger. Their eyes became more alert. Most importantly, their strength returned. Rex could now speak English clearly without the translator, and several other dragons were learning human words, but the dragons were giving back more than they received. Rex began teaching Jake things about engineering that humans had never discovered. He showed Jake how to modify simple tools using principles of living metal, making them work much better than before. Your people build things that break, Rex explained one day, watching Jake work on a ventilation panel with a tool Rex had helped him improve. We build things that grow and heal. This small change will make your tool last 10 times longer. Spark, the blue dragon, shared mathematical concepts with Kelly that solved medical problems human doctors had been working on for years. Even with her limited English, she could draw equations that made Kelly's eyes light up with understanding. The dragons also revealed more of their master plan. They had spent decades studying the station's design, memorizing every system and weakness. They knew exactly how to disable the station's defenses and communications, but only if they were strong enough to break out of their cells. When our people come, Rex told Jake, we will need to act fast. The Gray Ones must not be able to call for help or fight back effectively. Everything was going well until Commander Barnes made an unexpected inspection of the detention level. Jake was in the middle of feeding the dragons when he heard footsteps in the corridor. He quickly hid the extra food and grabbed the plasma prod, pretending to threaten Rex through the bars. Stay back, you beast, Jake said loudly, hoping he sounded convincing. Commander Barnes appeared with 2 alien guards. She looked around the detention level with suspicious eyes. Miller, why are you taking so long down here? Your feeding time has increased by 20 minutes over the past month. Some of the dragons have been more aggressive lately, Jake lied. I have to be more careful. Commander Barnes walked to Rex's cell. The large dragon was pressed against the back wall, pretending to be afraid of the plasma prod. But Jake could see intelligence in Rex's eyes as he watched the security chief. These creatures do look different, Barnes said. Healthier. Stronger. She turned to Jake. Are you sure you're only feeding them the approved amount? Yes, ma'am. Just what Veltarax gives me. One of the alien guards spoke up. Perhaps we should search the human's quarters. If he is stealing food, we will find evidence. Jake's heart started beating fast. His room was full of supplies that Tony had brought him. If they searched it, their whole operation would be discovered. That won't be necessary, Commander Barnes said. But Miller, I'm assigning security cameras to this level. From now on, everything you do down here will be recorded. After they left, Jake slumped against the wall. Security cameras would make everything impossible. How could they continue helping the dragons if everything was being watched? Rex moved closer to the bars. Jake, he said quietly, it is almost time. Time for what? Dan sent our message 3 days ago. Our people received it. They are coming. Rex's golden eyes were bright with hope and determination. Tomorrow night, we break free. Jake stared at Rex. Tomorrow, but the cameras, the security. The cameras do not matter now. When our people arrive, this station will surrender or be destroyed. But we must be ready to help them. We must disable the defenses from inside. Jake realized that their secret operation had reached its end. Tomorrow night, everything would change. The dragons would either be free or they would all be dead. What do you need me to do? Jake asked. Rex smiled, showing teeth that were no longer dull but sharp and bright. Be ready, my friend. Tomorrow you will see what dragons can really do. As Jake rode the elevator up for what might be the last time, he thought about how much his life had changed. A month ago, he was just a maintenance worker with a simple job. Now he was part of a plan that could change the entire galaxy. He was scared, but he was also proud. For the first time in his life, Jake Miller was part of something important. Tomorrow he would help 12 dragons become free, and maybe help save other species from the same fate. Jake went to find Tony, Kelly, and Dan. They needed to be ready for whatever was coming next. Jake barely slept that night. He kept checking the time on his tablet, knowing that somewhere in space, dragon ships were getting closer to the station. At breakfast, he tried to act normal, but Tony could tell something was wrong. Today's the day, isn't it? Tony whispered as they ate their synthetic eggs. Jake nodded. Rex said they would break out tonight. Are you ready? Kelly and Dan are ready too. We've hidden emergency supplies in the maintenance tunnels like you asked. Tony paused. Jake, what if this goes wrong? What if people get hurt? Rex promised that innocent humans would be protected. We just have to trust them. But Jake's trust was tested sooner than expected. At lunchtime, Veltirax found him in the cafeteria with an angry expression on his purple face. Human Miller, you will come with me now. There has been a change in the dragon feeding schedule. Jake followed his supervisor to the equipment room, where Commander Barnes and 2 Zephyrian officials were waiting. The aliens wore formal robes with gold decorations, which meant they were important. These are trade ministers from the Empire, Veltirax explained. They have come to select a dragon for harvesting. You will assist in the procedure. Jake's blood turned cold. Harvesting? One of the trade ministers spoke with a voice like grinding. Metal. We need fresh dragon scales for an important trade agreement. The smallest dragon will be sufficient. Its death will bring great profit. They were going to kill one of the dragons. Jake thought about Sage, the gentle green dragon who always waited for others to eat first. Sage was the smallest and weakest. When? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Now, Commander Barnes said. Get your equipment. You'll help hold the creature still while the ministers do their work. Jake's hands were shaking as he picked up the plasma prod. He had to warn the dragon somehow, but how could he do it with everyone watching? The group went down to level 17 together. Jake could hear the new security cameras humming as they recorded everything. When they reached Sage's cell, the gentle dragon was sleeping near the back wall. Wake it up, one of the trade ministers ordered. Jake approached the cell slowly. Sage, he called softly. The green dragon opened its eyes and looked at him. Jake tried to make his eyes show warning, hoping Sage would understand that danger was coming. Sage stood up slowly and walked toward the bars. The dragon looked at the group of aliens and seemed to understand what was happening. But instead of being afraid, Sage looked directly at Jake and nodded slightly. The trade ministers began setting up their harvesting equipment, sharp tools designed to cut scales from living dragons. Jake realized they weren't just going to kill Sage quickly. They were planning to hurt the dragon slowly. I can't do this, Jake said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. Commander Barnes stepped forward. What did you say, Miller? I said, I can't do this. This is murder. Veltarax's four arms waved angrily. It is not murder, it is resource collection. The dragon is property of the Empire. No, Jake said, his voice getting stronger. Sage is not property. None of them are. They're people, and you've been torturing them for 300 years. The trade ministers looked confused. One of them clicked angrily at Veltarax. What is this human talking about? Dragons are not people. They are animals. The dragons can talk, Jake said loudly. They have language and culture and families. Rex, tell them. For a moment, there was silence. Then Rex's voice boomed through the detention level, speaking perfect galactic standard, the common language used by all space-traveling species. Greetings, murderers and thieves. We are the survivors of Andoria Prime, and we accuse the Zephyrian Empire of genocide and slavery. The trade ministers stepped backward in shock. Commander Barnes pulled out her weapon. All around the detention level, the other dragons stood up and began speaking in galactic standard, their voices joining together in a powerful chorus. We are not animals. We are the children of Andoria, and our people are coming for us. The trade ministers started shouting at each other in the Zephyrian language. Veltarax was clicking frantically, trying to understand what was happening. Commander Barnes was talking rapidly into her communication device, calling for backup. That's when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. An alarm began wailing throughout the station. A voice spoke over the station's communication system, but it wasn't human or Zephyrian. It was the musical language of the dragons, translated into galactic standard. Attention Nexus Station 7. This is Ember Wing of the Andorian Fleet. You are harboring prisoners of war illegally. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences. Through the small windows in the detention level, Jake could see lights moving outside the station. Ships were approaching, large, beautiful vessels that seemed to flow through space like living creatures instead of machines. The dragon ships had arrived. Rex looked directly at the terrified aliens. You have one choice. Release us and begin negotiations, or watch your station burn around you. Commander Barnes raised her weapon toward Rex. You're still in cages, monster. You can't do anything. Rex smiled, showing teeth that gleamed in the red emergency light. Jake, please step away from the cells. Jake moved quickly toward the corridor. As soon as he was clear, Rex gripped the bars of his cell with both hands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jake heard the sound of metal bending and breaking. Rex had been pretending to be weak. All the dragons had been pretending. They had enough strength to break free whenever they wanted, but they had been waiting for the right moment. One by one, all 12 dragons broke out of their cells. They moved with grace and power that took Jake's breath away. These weren't the tired, sick creatures he had been feeding. These were apex predators who had been playing a long game. The trade ministers tried to run, but Spark moved faster than Jake thought possible and blocked their escape. Commander Barnes fired her weapon at Rex, but the energy beam bounced harmlessly off his scales. Enough, Rex said, his voice calm but commanding. No one will be harmed if you cooperate. Jake, Tony, Kelly, Dan, please come forward. Jake's human friends appeared from the corridor where they had been hiding. The dragons surrounded the humans protectively while keeping the aliens in the center of the group. You humans showed us kindness when no one else would, Rex continued. You will be protected and honored among our people. As for the rest, he looked at the trembling aliens. You will stand trial for your crimes. A new voice came over the communication system, speaking in accented but clear English. Jake Miller, please respond. This is Emberwing. My brother Rex has told me much about you. Jake looked around until he found a communication panel. With shaking hands, he pressed the button. This is Jake Miller. Jake Miller, you have done a great service for our people. We offer you a choice. You may return to Earth with our gratitude and gifts of technology, or you may join us among the stars as our first human ally. Jake looked at Rex, who nodded encouragingly. He thought about his small apartment on Earth, his boring job fixing air conditioners, his quiet life with no purpose. Then he thought about everything he had learned from the dragons, about the other species that might need help, about the galaxy full of wonders he had never imagined. I choose the stars, Jake said into the communicator. Rex placed a gentle claw on Jake's shoulder. Welcome to the Andorian fleet, Ambassador Jake Miller. You have work to do. As the dragon ships docked with the station and Ember Wings diplomatic team came aboard, Jake realized his life as a simple maintenance worker was over. He was now humanity's first representative to an ancient, powerful civilization that respected courage and kindness above all else. The dragons were free. The Zephyrian Empire would face justice, and Jake Miller had found his true purpose among the stars. All because he had one simple job: feed the dragons, and chose to offer them something more than food. He had offered them friendship, and that had made all the difference.